Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nitam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, Chapter 7, Scheduled Incarnations, Text 47. Shashvat Prashantam Abhayam Pratibodha Matram Shuddham Samam Sat Asataha Paramatma Tattvam Shabdo Na Yatra Uru Karakavan Kriyartho Maya Paraiti Abhimukhe Cha Vilajjamana Tad Vai Padam Bhagavataha Paramasya Pumso Brahmeti Yad Vidur Ajashra Sukham Vishokam. Shashvat Prashantam Abhayam Pratibodhamatram Shuddham Samam Sadasata Paramatma Tattvam Shabdona Yatra Purukarakavan Kriyartho Maya Parittabhimukhe Cha Vilajjamana Tadvai Padam Bhagavata Paramasya Pumsho Brahmeti Jad Vijurajashra Sukham Vishokam Shashvat Prashantam Abhayam Pratibodhamatram Shuddham Samam Sadasata Paramatma Tattvam Shabdona Yatra Purukarakavan Kriyartho Maya Parittabhimukhe Cha Vilajjamana Tadvai Padam Bhagavata Paramasya Pumso Brahmeti Jad Vidurajasra Sukham Vishokam Shashvat Prashantam Abhayam Pratibodhamatram Shuddham Samam Sadasata Paramatma Tattvam Shabdona Yatra Purukarakavan Kriyartho Maya Parittabhimukhe Cha Vilajjamana Tadvai Padam Bhagavata Paramasya Pumso ajashta sukham vishokam. Shashvat, eternal, prashantam, without disturbance, abhayam, without fear, pratibodha matram, a consciousness opposed to the material counterpart. Suddham, uncontaminated. Samam, without distinction. Sat asataha, of the cause and effect. Paramatam, the principle of primeval cause. Shabdaha, speculative sound. Na, not. Yatra, where there is. Urukarakavan, resulting in fruitive action. Kriya artha, for the matter of sacrifice. Maya, illusion. Paraiti, flies away. Abhimukhe, in front of. Cha, also. Vilajyamana, being ashamed of. Tat, that. Vai, is certainly. Padam, ultimate faith. Bhagavatam, of the personality of Godhead. Paramasya, the supreme. Pumsaha, of the person. Brahma, the absolute. Iti, thus. Yat, which. Vidu, known as. Ajashra, unlimited. Sukham, happiness. Vishokam, without grief. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter. Uncontaminated and without distinction, He is the principle of primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activity, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. Please repeat after me. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss, without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter. Uncontaminated and without distinction. He is the principal primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activity, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's quite a long purport, so I thought I'll just go paragraph by paragraph. The Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead, is the Supreme Brahman, or the Samam Bonam, because of his being the supreme cause of all causes. The conception of impersonal Brahman realization is the first step. Due to his distinction from the illusory conception of material existence. In other words, impersonal Brahman is a feature of the Absolute, distinct from the material variegatedness, just as light is a conception distinct from its counterpart, darkness. But the light has its variegatedness, which is seen by those who further advance in the light. And thus the ultimate realization of Brahman is the source of the Brahman light, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Samam Bonam, or the ultimate source of everything. Therefore, meeting the personality of Godhead includes the realization of the impersonal Brahman as realized at first, in contrast with material inability. The personality of Godhead is the third step of Brahman realization. As explained in the first canto, one must understand all three features of the Absolute, Brahma, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So, after describing the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His various incarnations, previous about 40 verses, now Brahma is coming to the conclusion. Who is this personality who incarnates in so many different ways? Who is that Supreme Lord? Who is that Supreme Cause of all causes? Who is that Supreme in all respects? So now Brahma is concluding through this particular verse. Who is the Supreme Personality of God? And now he is pointing out that what is realized as the Absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief. That Absolute Brahman, this concept of Brahman has been negatively presented by Shankaracharya. And that's what has caused an inconceivable confusion in this domain of spiritual understanding. Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva himself, and he actually established this Mayavad or Kevalantaiktavad or Vivartavad in order to achieve certain purpose. That is to re-establish the Vedas and bewilder Mana Janan Madhvimukhan. Krishna instructed, Lord Narayan instructed Shankar, Lord Shiva, to make them averse to me. But who to make them, he wanted that should be made averse to? Those who are atheistic. So atheistic people will get a very good opportunity to even reject the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though they are apparently following the path of religion, following the path of spiritualism. They are on the path of spiritualism, but they are actually averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Padma Puran it has been described that Mahadev is telling Parvati, Mayavadam Ashachastram Prachanna Bhutam Vishati Mayaivo Vihitam Devi Kalo Brahmana. In the age of Kali, I will appear as a Brahmana and I will establish a temporary philosophy, a temporary scriptural conclusion. Scriptural conclusion which is not really the real one, but it's just a temporary one to achieve certain purpose. And which is Prachanda Bodham Vichati, is a covered atheism. Covered Buddhism. It is covered Buddhism. And Buddhism is covered atheism. Prachanna bodham uchyate mayeva bhitam kalu brahma. The Vedas have this impersonal aspect, but that is positive impersonal, which is known as Brahmavad. So Shankaracharya established a new concept called Vivartavad or Mayavad. And what did Prabhupada come to do? What did Prabhupada? Why did Prabhupada come to achieve? Prabhupada came to remove, to drive away that misconception. That Mayavad is also known as Nirvisheshva. So Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Pashtita. Prabhupada came to drive away that Nirvisheshva and Shunnavadi. And so here in Bhagavatam also we find that Brahma is pointing out that generally, due to the Mayavad concept, the understanding is that Brahman is devoid of form, devoid of qualities, devoid of name, devoid of pastimes, devoid of activities, devoid of everything. Nirakar, Nirvishesh, Nishakti. Nirakar doesn't have any form. Nirvishesh doesn't have any variation. Nishakti doesn't have any potency. So if this is nothing, nothing and nothing, then what is that? That is ultimately amounting to nothing. So what is Brahman? It's actually pointing out that Brahman is nothing. So Shunnavad is nothing, and this is Prachanna Bodha. Buddha established Shunnavad, and this is Prachanna Bodha. In an indirect way, it is also pointing out Shunna, nothing. Although apparently it's saying Brahman is everything, but definition of Brahman is nothing. Nirakar, Nirvishesh, Nishakti. Then what does Brahma have? If it doesn't have any form, if it doesn't have any quality, if it doesn't have any potency, if it doesn't have any variation, then what is it? So that's why Prachanna Bodha, indirect, nihili, indirect void. But the Vedic concept of Brahman also, in the Vedas also, it is impersonal. Brahma Jyoti, it's a light. And that light is the source of everything. That light is actually the source of everything. Scientifically also we can see that how sun is the source of everything in this world. The sun is the source of everything in a way. It is because of the sun that the vegetations are there. It is because of the sun that the light is there. It is because of the sun, indirectly there's so many things. It's because of the sun that the rain is there. If the sun did not evaporate water from the ocean, there wouldn't have been any rain. If the sun was not there, there wouldn't have been any vegetation. There wouldn't have been any tree or plant or grass or what to speak of the living entities. If the sun was not there, it wouldn't have been there. So the sun is the source of everything in a way, but not directly. If not directly, it's indirectly. The sun is the source of everything. Consider where the energy is coming from. All the energy that we are sourcing from, what are the energies? Basic energies are oil and coal, etc. So what are the cause of that energy? Does anybody know what is the cause? How is petroleum? Petroleum has energy. How is coal has energy? Who knows? Big scientist? Only Ganganarayan is the only scientist. Okay, tell me. How does coal have energy?
Trees by this process of photosynthesis.
Yeah, by the process of photosynthesis can
store energy in plant.
Right. The sun's energy is absorbed in the trees by the process of photosynthesis. In simple words, you can say that the trees are actually conserving, taking the energy from the sun and preserving it in the cells. And that's why when we light the wood, what happens? The fire comes out. Because the fire is there. Where did the tree get the fire from? From the sun. Now on these trees, under a tremendous compression for a long period of time under the surface of the earth, turns into coal or oil. So there also, this way you can see all the entire source of energy and everything is the sun. Now tell me, where does the sun get this energy from? Is the sun cause of all causes? Yes, Mother.
From Brahman?
Yes. The Brahma Jyoti. Sun is like a mirror reflecting Brahma Jyoti into this planet. Not exactly like a mirror. It's not the sun is a mirror and it's reflecting. But sun is simply transmitting that spiritual energy for Brahma Jyoti into this universe. So this Brahma Jyoti is a spiritual light, not material light. It's a spiritual light. And where does the light come from? That light is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. This Brahma Jyoti is the bodily effulgence of the body. So the next paragraph will go into that. So here, this particular verse is pointing out what? Not Brahma, but the source of Brahma. Param Brahma. Paratattam Param. This Paratattva, the supreme absolute cause, Param Brahma. There is Brahma. Brahma is the bodily effulgence. But who is the source of the Brahma? Brahma is there, but who is the source of the Brahma? Who is the source? Param Brahma. Who is the Param Brahma? Yes, Brahma is Nirvishesh. Brahma is devoid of form, doesn't have any form. But Brahma is not Nishakti. That is the mistake that is in the presentation of Bhagavatam. Impersonalism, as it has been presented through this concept of Kevaladvaitavad or Nirvana. Nishakti. No, Brahman is source of all the Shakti. To say that Nishri doesn't have any potency will be a mistake. But yes, his potency is not material. Yes, it will come into the purport later on. I will get into that afterwards. And another thing, Prabhupada once pointed out that how do you feel if somebody whom you love very much and whose form is so beautiful, you are in love with that person and the person is so beautiful, and if somebody comes and tells you that he doesn't have a leg, he doesn't have his hand, how will you feel if somebody comes and tells you that your father or your son, whom you love very much, is a Gunga and who is a Langa? How will you feel? Won't you feel like beating him up? You get to call my father, who is so beautiful, who is so full with all this in his limbs, and you are saying that he is a layman? So that is how a devotee feels when somebody comes and tells that the Lord doesn't have a form. He doesn't have any legs. That means God is lying. He doesn't have any head. He doesn't have any form. He is the source of all beauty, and you are saying that he doesn't have any form. Can something that doesn't have a form be beautiful? No. Beauty means form. So, the last sentence of this stanza, this paragraph has been described, and as explained in the first canto, one must understand the three features of the Absolute: Brahma, Paramatma, and Brahma. How many of you know that verse? Okay, Aditya.
Vadanti Dastarata Shraddhavana Padati.
What happened? Confused or nervous? Okay, তুমি হাত তুলেছিলে? তুলেছিলে? তুমি কি বলেছিলে? শ্রদ্ধাবান করতে Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam jajnanam anvayam. This knowledge, which is actually non-dual, does not have any duality. That absolute truth has been described by the Tattvavidas, the knowers of the truth, as Brahma, Paramatma, and Atma. The non-dual Advaita Tattva is described in three ways. That means this one absolute who doesn't have any second has been defined or described in these three features. Brahma, as I mentioned earlier, what is Brahman? Brahman is the bodily effulgence of the Lord. Then next to Brahman is Brahmeti Paramatma. Who is Paramatma? What is the Paramatma aspect of the Advaita Tattva? Is localized aspect. The aspect of that absolute truth that is present in everyone's heart as the super soul. It is Him who is present, which is inconceivable potency in everyone's heart. Sometimes I saw devotees got into a big argument whether Paramatma is one or many. Now they are making the same mistake, trying to understand the absolute with his mundane conception. He is one, at the same time he is many. He expands himself, but he is one. The personality who is in your heart and his heart and our heart and my heart is the same person, although he is there in everyone's heart. How is it possible? That is his inconceivable potency. Therefore, don't get into arguments. Natam starkena tarka apratishta shutaya vibhina. Don't get into tarka. Don't get into argument. Try to understand the information. There was an anecdote, like how this point can be described, like how we get into tarka and start to fight. Like two persons were standing on two sides of a screen. From this side, the person is saying that the screen is blue. And from the other side, the person is saying that the screen is red. And they started to fight. They killed each other. But when they fell, this person fell on this side, the other person fell on that side. And then they saw, yes, this side of the screen is blue and the other side of the screen is red. So we should not unnecessarily get into arguments that my understanding is the best. So just try to rather adjust the other person's understanding. Try to understand from which perspective he is seeing it. And then there won't be any confusion, then there won't be any conflict. So Paramatma, the Lord, is present in everyone's heart. When He is in my heart, He has a relationship with me. When He is in your heart, He has a relationship with you. When He is in His heart, He has a relationship with Him. So that is how He is. He has His relationship with everyone. Therefore, there is no need to say, He is present only in my heart, not in your heart. Or, no, you are a Hindu, God is present in your heart. If you are not a Hindu, then God only is present in your heart. No, it's nothing like that. He is present in everyone's heart. Not only in the hearts of the human beings, He is in the hearts of the animals, He is in the hearts of the insects, He is in the hearts of the reptiles, He is in the hearts of all the aquatics, He is in the heart of the trees and plants and everything. So that is His inconceivable goodness. He can expand Himself in such an unlimited way. So that is the Paramatma aspect of it. Paramatma. And then Bhagavan iti Shubha. What is the Bhagavan aspect? The Bhagavan is the Supreme Personality of God. So He possesses 6 opulences to the absolute extent. He is the most beautiful, He is the most powerful, He is the most famous, He is the most opulent, He is the most wise, and He is the most pronounced. Now He is a person. And that personality is the cause of all causes. So that is the Supreme Personality of God, Bhagavan. And it is a matter of seeing Him from the distance. From what distance we are seeing Him, that is what is causing us to see Him. In this way, Prabhupada gives an example. You look at a train at night. You are standing in the platform at night. It's all dark. What do you see first? You see the light. And then, when it comes a little closer, then what do you see? You see the train. And then when it stops, and when you go inside the train, what do you see? People are sitting there, right? Passengers. Now, when you see from the train from a distance, you see the light. When you see the train passing by, you see it as a train. But when you are inside the train, then you see. Or another example can be given in this respect. Or Prabhupada again gives another example. Like when you see, now we are seeing the sun. How are you seeing the sun? In the form of the light. Right? Like because of the sun, this place is lit up. When you go out of the room, what will you see? When you go out of the room, then you will see the sun in the sky. The glow, the sun glow. And then if we can manage to go to the sun and withstand its heat, if we are still alive, then what will you see? We will see there are living entities, there are palaces, there are roads, there are vehicles. Only there is no garbage. And then there will see the sun give a shot. We'll be able to see him face to face. So similarly, when you see the Lord from a distance, when you try to see Him through jnana, with our own knowledge, when you try to see Him, how do we see Him? Finally we are able to see Him. We see Him as the Brahman. When we see Him through the process of Ashtanga Yoga, through Yam, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dhyan, Dharan and Samadhi. Then finally at the stage of Samadhi, what happens? We see Him in our hearts as the Supersoul. Paramatma. And then when we become engaged in His devotional service, when we develop our love for Him and express our love to Him, then He may manifest himself. So through Jnana, we see him as Brahman. Through Yoga, we see him as Paramatma. And through devotion, we see him as Bhagavatam. So we have to see him in these three aspects. We have to understand him in these three aspects. We shouldn't say, well, Brahman is everything. No, Bhagavan, no, I can't accept. This is just imaginary. People who cannot think of the non-existent, when people cannot think of think of Brahman without the form, then you can imagine a form, and that is your Bhagavan. We don't accept that. We are much more elevated. You are neophyte, you are in the lower class, you are in the kindergarten school, that's why you are thinking of this form. But we are the postgraduate students, we don't need the form. We can meditate on him without the form. Or to say, no, Paramatma is everything. Bhagavan is the Paramatma, that is the Atma. No, we have to understand the same person. Just like the High Court judge, in the court he is addressed as my Lord. Isn't it? The High Court judge is addressed as my Lord. What is the address of the judge? Your Honor. No. Anyway, but he is addressed as my Lord. When he goes to the club, then how is that addressed? Oh, Justice so and so. And then when he is at home, how is he addressed? His son calls him Daddy, son and daughter. His mother calls him Beta. His wife calls him Ogo. So this is how he's addressed in different, the same person. The same person is seen in different way at different places. But does it mean that he is one and not the other? Will the people, the lawyer who is pleading the case in the court and addressing him as my Lord, like will he deny that no, he is not Justice so and so. He is not Justice Das, Krishna Das. Or can he say that no, he is not the father? No, father is somebody else. So ultimately we have to recognize that there are different perspectives, and according to those perspectives, the absolute truth is seen in different ways. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul of everything, and therefore, in the Supreme Conception, affection is realized. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul of everything, and therefore, in the Supreme Conception of affection, in the Supreme Conception, affection is realized. The conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. Affection or love is between soul to soul. Like, can you love somebody when that person is dead? Can you love the dead body of the person? No, love demands reciprocation. Love is reciprocal. Although people may say, I love my car, or sometimes we saw an advertisement in America that it says, cars love Shell. Shell is Shell. Cars love Shell. But can a car love petrol? No, the petrol is inert, the car is inert, how can there be love? Or can love be between between a living and a non-living entity? Like I will say, I love my car. But can you really love the car? No. Because the car doesn't respond. But yes, one can love his dog. The dog reciprocates. As soon as you come home, it starts to jump. Oh, I'm so happy you came back. So, yes, with a dog you can develop your love. And what to speak of conscious living entities like human beings. Yes, there is loving relationship. And that love is what causes the bond. So the conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. It is due to the relationship that affection or love develops. A father is affectionate to his son because there is some relationship of nearness between the son and the father. But that sort of affection in material world is full of inequality. It is not in the material nature, always loving relationships are full of inequity. Full of inebriety. Inebriety actually means to lose consciousness or to be drunken, inebriated, losing one's identity. So that relationship is not with proper understanding of one's identity. That is impeded, that is deficient. The loving relationship in the material nature is temporary, is full of impediments. When the personality of Godhead is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. But when one sees the Lord, then that relationship becomes real. Because the relationship between the living entity and the Lord is real. He is not the object of affection by material tinges of body and mind, but he is the full, naked, uncontaminated object of affection for all living entities, because he is the super soul or Paramatma within everyone's heart. In a liberated state of affairs, the full-fledged affection for the Lord is awakened. In the liberated stage, that full-fledged affection for the Lord is awakened. And that is the liberated state. Liberated state cannot be an artificial plane. It is a natural situation. When a living entity is related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in their natural loving relationship, that is the state of liberation. As such, there is an unlimited flow of everlasting happiness without a fear of its being broken, as we have experienced here in the material world. In a material world, all the relationships ultimately break, comes to an end. But this relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is everlasting. It will never cease. It will never break. In a material nature, we see the greatest love affairs break, either in divorce or in death. Whereas in the spiritual world, our relationship with the Lord is everlasting. It will never break, because it's real. Whereas in the material nature, the relationship is between two bodies. And since the bodies are temporary, the relationship is temporary. Since the body is changing, that relationship also is prone to change. There's a German philosopher called Schopenhauer. He was a woman hater. He was a big philosopher. And he mentioned that whenever I see a woman, I try to imagine, whenever I see a beautiful woman, and I tend to get attracted towards her, I tend to think, if I saw her 40 or 50 years from now, would I feel the same way? You're seeing a 20-year-old girl, very attractive, very beautiful. But when you see the same girl, when she is 70 years old, would you feel like telling her, I love you so much, I'm prepared to give my life for you. Will you? Will it? No, this is how transient the material relationships are. These relationships are just based on body. When the body is attractive, one feels attractive. When the body becomes old and wrinkled, then it becomes repulsive. As such, there is an unlimited flow of everlasting happiness without the fear of being broken, and we have experienced here in the material world. The relationship with the Lord is never broken. Thus, there is no grief and no fear. Such happiness is inexplicable by words. That happiness that one develops by developing a loving relationship with the Lord is inexplicable, indescribable. And there can be no attempt to generate such happiness by fruitive activity, by arrangements and sacrifices. But we must also know that happiness, unbroken happiness exchanged with the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead as described in this verse, transcends the impersonal conceptions of the Upanishads. In the Upanishads, the description is more or less negative of the material concept of things. But this is not denial of the transcendental sense of the Supreme Lord. So Upanishads, which is actually the preliminary study of the Vedic philosophy, they tend to see the absolute in comparison to the material nature. Therefore, the conclusions are kind of negative. The material, but the spiritual doesn't have this quality. Therefore, the spiritual is non-material, therefore opposed to material. Matter has form, and that doesn't have a material form. That is the conclusion. The absolute, the transcendence doesn't have a material form. The transcendence doesn't have material qualities. Transcendence doesn't have material validity. But that doesn't mean that transcendence doesn't have a form, doesn't have variegatedness, doesn't have quality. So unfortunately, the concept of the presentations of the Upanishads are misunderstood by less informed. When it says that the Lord doesn't have material form, they conclude the Lord doesn't have it. Herein also the same is affirmed in the statements about the material elements. They are all transcendental, free from all contamination of material identification. And also the liberated souls are not devoid of senses. Otherwise there cannot be any reciprocation of unhampered spiritual happiness exchanged between them. in spontaneous, unbroken joy. So, the ultimate conclusion is that the Lord, in his spiritual identity, has a spiritual form. We should not think that he doesn't have a form. Or we should not think that at a liberated state, one becomes devoid of his senses and perception. The Lord has his spiritual form, and a pure devotee, a liberated soul, has purified senses. Otherwise, a loving relationship between the devotee and the Lord wouldn't have been possible. And we have to understand that in that reciprocation of unhampered spiritual happiness, the devotee and the Lord exchange between them the spontaneous, unbroken joy. All the senses, both of the Lord and of the devotees, are with material contamination. They are so because they are beyond the material cause and effects. As clearly mentioned herein, Sadasata Param, Sad Asata Param. The illusory material energy cannot work there, being ashamed before the Lord and his transcendental devotees. In the material world, the sense activities are not without grief. But here it is clearly said that the senses of the Lord and the devotees are without any grief. There is a distinct difference between the material and spiritual senses. And one should understand it without denying the spiritual senses because of a material conception or because of a material misconception. The senses in the material world are surcharged with material ignorance. The senses in the material world, our material senses, are surcharged with ignorance. In every way, the authorities have recommended purification of the senses from the material conception. In the material world, the senses are manipulated by individual and personal satisfaction, whereas in the spiritual world, the senses are properly used for the purpose for which they are originally meant, namely the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Such sensual activities are natural, and therefore sense gratification there is uninterrupted and unbroken by material contamination, because the senses are spiritually purified. And such satisfaction of the senses is equally shared by the transcendental reciprocators. Since the activities are unlimited and constantly increasing, there is no scope for material attempt or artificial arrangements. Such happiness of transcendental quality is called Brahma Sokham, which will be clearly described in the 5th canto. So, it is a matter of developing a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How that relationship can be established? What is the first principle of developing our relationship with the Lord? If we want to love somebody, we have to know him. Right? So the first of all, we have to know him. And what is the way to know him? If I want to know about somebody, how do I get to know him? I get to know him by hearing about him. And there we can either directly hear from the person who knows him, or we can read the scriptures, and thus we can read. The more we get to know him, and he's such a wonderful person, that we automatically fall in love. And as our love develops for him, we develop an inconceivable craving to serve him, to express our love for him. That comes out in the form of service. And it is through that service that our senses Sevan mukhe hi jubhado. Sevan mukhe, seva unmukh. When our senses, when our limbs are engaged in serving Him, then our senses become pure. And when our senses become purified, then our loving relationship with Him becomes a reality. And that loving relationship is the source of joy. And through that loving relationship with that Supreme Absolute Personality, we can achieve everything. Achieve everything means then our heart will become completely satisfied. Our heart is not satisfied. Nobody's heart in the material nature is fully satisfied. Why? Because he or she is not getting what he wants. We don't get what we want. Therefore our heart is always discontent. But when we get what we really want, then our heart will become completely satisfied. And what we really want, what does everybody want? Everybody wants Krishna. Everybody wants Krishna. Everybody needs to love Krishna. And everybody wants to reciprocate with Krishna in that loving relationship. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
The impersonalists who do not believe in the form of God, but still they make temples. And then as you were saying, they say that because you are in the preliminary stage, you need to worship the beauty form of the Lord. But when you are advanced, you will not. But how can they say this, that in the preliminary stage you need to have this, and in the later stage you don't have. So the Lord has a form in the preliminary stage and He doesn't have a form in the advanced stage.
They are saying their concept is that these forms are imaginary. Brahman is ultimately without form. But because when one is in a neophyte stage, he is not able to meditate on the formless Brahman. That's why he has to first learn to meditate, fix his mind on the form, through the form.
Where has this form come from? Where has this form come from?
You better ask them. They say, they imagine it means that form came from your mind, somebody's mind. And they think of 5 forms according to the nature. Even in that stage also, you have to meditate on the form according to your mode. If you are in ignorance, then you worship Devi or Shiva. When you are in the mode of passion, you worship Surya. And when you are in the mode of goodness, then you worship Vishnu. In the mode of passion, I think Surya and Ganapati. And in the mode of goodness, you worship Vishnu. And then, when you become Narayan, beyond that, when you don't, then you don't need anything. Because then you have become Narayan.
Logically, it is not so convincing.
Then let everybody worship you.
It is not at all convincing.
You know, like hodgepodge is always a hodgepodge. You know, you see, in a calculation, if you make a mistake at the beginning, no matter how much you can keep on going, will you ever come to a correct result?
Not come to a
You won't come to a correct. And that's the problem with it. That's why Shankaracharya is saying, Lord Shiva is saying, Mayavalam Ashat Shastra. Ashat means temporary. For the time being, it was necessary. Established it for the time being. And when the purpose was served, then it was rejected. Yes.
When a human being describes their intrigue with another human being in terms of being in love, the discussion is imbued with many exciting references so that the other person also becomes attracted to their beloved, so much so that they want to meet this person whom their friend is talking about. So in our presentation of Shyam, to what extent and how expert should we become in delivering the knowledge in such a way that the hearer becomes actually imbued with excitement?
It's endless. There's no limit. But the expression will take place according to the realization or according to the love of the speaker. Or you can say according to the love of the lover. The deeper you're in love, the more eloquent you become. Ujjain. But then also you will do it to the right audience. Like, say a boy is in love with a girl, he doesn't go and start glorifying or start expressing how much he is in love with that girl to his competitor, to his rival. But to his friends he tells how wonderful the girl is and what they have done together.
Another question, Maharaj. Lord Shiva accepts a seemingly contradictory instruction from his spiritual master, the Lord, to present this temporary science. So we've seen in ISKCON that many of our great souls who were posing or living as gurus also gave some contradictory instructions which were followed by disciples who were naive, and therefore they suffered immeasurably. So where is the difference, and how do we discern the difference?
The difference is that Lord Shiva is always a devotee, and he is not deviating from the path of devotion. He may, under the order of his master, act in a certain way, but he is not ceasing to be the devotee of God. Well, the problem with the individual that you are talking about, in most cases, they cease to be the devotee. So that's the difference. You know, if we remain the devotee of the Lord and under the instruction of the Lord, if we keep on acting, that will be a devotional service. But if we stop to be the devotee, cease to be a devotee, then whatever we do will not have any relevance. Okay, thank you very much. Our glories to Srila Prabhupada.